Hey, Joe.
What's up?
Not much, man. I'm excited
I,
for today.
I'm pumped. I'm pumped. Especially when you just, like I seriously, but joking was like, well, here's our talking point for tomorrow if you're interested.
Yeah,
Holy,
perfect.
holy smokes. What we'll do is give it a minute or so just to give people a chance to get on, and I think it notifies the live stream. But outside of that, we're gonna dive right in and crank on this thing.
Cool.
Where are you in the country right now?
I'm home on the
Oh,
shore in Queenstown.
oh, you nice, nice, nice. Are you traveling much at all or no?
I haven't been, but I will be starting here in probably the first 2 weeks of February. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
We'll talk about it. Were you traveling at any point with Hover or
Yeah,
no?
I traveled a good bit with Hover. Yeah.
Fun. I,
Yeah.
I don't
Went out
say
to
that. I don't
California.
say that very openly in case my wife ever sees one of these, but it's freaking awesome.
Yeah, I racked up a lot of miles and points, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I actually am taking my daughter my wife and my daughter and I. We're going to see our going down to Florida, South Florida tomorrow for a little getaway, and it's nice to throw Teddy on the old companion pass with Southwest.
Oh, there you go.
So
Yeah, my sister moved down to Boca in August, and like every day she sends me pictures of the beach and the pool. I'm like, damn you.
yeah,
So enjoy
yeah.
that because it's been pretty crappy around here.
I bet that's exactly what your response is. Damn you. Sure,
Yeah.
that's
What I
exactly
said
what
is
it
actually nicer than what I actually said to
is.
her.
Awesome. Well, we got some people jumping on. If you're coming, I got to make sure to pay attention to comments. I forgot about that. Hold on one second here. But obviously, if you're jumping on, we're gonna dive in. Pound the like key or whatever key. Let us know. Awesome. Someone's in Fort Lauderdale. See, it never tells me who it is, but I'm in Fort Lauderdale now. Holler. Yeah.
Jealous.
Yeah. Oh, Andy. Andy's in. Good deal. Hey, Jax. I'm gonna call you Jax because if I call you Jacquelyn, it's weird. But
all the names.
Tell everybody who doesn't know who Jacquelyn Martin is. Give us the rundown.
Yeah, so I was actually lucky enough to start my career in home improvements working for Joe Downey. I was a financial advisor, pretty unhappy in that role, left that after about 18 months and had a friend, Katie Shushko, shout out, who was working at Thompson Creek at the time and was like, hey, you should come sell windows. I was like, I don't know anything about a window and I don't want to sell that stuff. She's like, no. Like, you don't have to cold call. We give you all your leads. And so I interviewed with you. You were gracious enough to hire me. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
And I got to be part of Team Delta, trained by Joe, an amazing 3 days in the classroom, grueling with Rob Cochran, also a phenomenal salesperson.
Yeah.
Then I hit the road, stayed on the road for almost 20 months, 18 months, something like that. And then when I found out you were leaving, you told me that I should replace you. And I thought that was crazy. I was like, man, Joe, I don't think I want to deal with all these salespeople, but interviewed, got that job, and took over a team. We ran the Baltimore territory. I think I managed like 12 reps at the time. We were pretty successful and grew that territory. And then I became the general manager of sales at Thompson Creek. So managed the outside sales team and the managers in outside sales there. Then worked my way up to director of sales, head of sales. So oversaw inside sales, outside sales, and consumer finance and sales operations, and helped grow them from 60 to right around 100 million in about 3.5 years, which was a wild ride. Opened up 3 locations under my tenure there, and then left Thompson Creek to get into the technology side, but still wanted to work with contractors. So I joined Hover in July of 21, I think it was. And I oversaw small business, mid-market, and large accounts for Hover. So account executives going in, finding new contractors to serve at Hover, and then account management, managing the existing contractors that have been doing business with Hover. I left Hover in August of last year to kind of pursue getting back into the contracting space. Honestly, like, I'm a contractor at heart. I missed it. I love it. And so what I've been doing since I left Hover is I've been consulting directly with some contractors, helping them with sales operations, marketing, staffing, change management, technology integrations, things of that sort. And then been supporting some private equity firms through acquisition processes and helping them with the growth strategies that they're trying to deploy into the companies that they've invested in. So been in the industry for, God, a little over a decade now, almost 11 years in April. So thank you for bringing me in, Joe.
That's freaking awesome. I didn't realize that. Yeah, time does fly. Wow.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, I do remember the part where I was like, hey, look, I guess, if you look at it, logically, you probably won't get the position, but if you want, I really would recommend you do attempt. And you did the rest of the work, obviously, but that was always awesome to see and hear. And it's funny, I still run into a lot of people, and actually, there's people on here right now saying, come back, Jax. I don't know whether they mean hover or, but probably TC. But, and then somebody gives a shout out to Delta Daddy. That is,
Delta Daddy.
We'll talk about that some other show. That's the after hours. I was just with a good group, probably 2 weeks ago, out on the West Coast, some friends of ours, and they were like, oh my God, that's right. Jax. And I'm like, yeah, like, she's sharp. I was like, yeah. Plus, you're just in your face. I love it. You don't back down. You know what I mean? And I don't mean that like it, but like you see what you want to do and accomplish, and you just go get it. And that, to me, that's just an amazing quality with, because you also do it from the front, lead it out in the front and show people by example. So that's,
I remember that interview process was so crazy. It was like a boardroom of like 20 people in there asking me questions. So I remember coming out and being like, holy cow, Joe, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
That was the most intimidating interview I've ever had in all of my career. That's for sure.
It was a big decision, right? I think that gets overlooked in a lot of places, right? And person gets thrown into a role, and it's a topic that comes up often is, top reps becoming top managers. And I say, I don't think it's as far off as long as expectations are set and clear. Yeah. It's when you just assume it'll happen, and the expectations and the values of being a top rep versus being a sales manager are completely different. One is very, I would say, selfish, but rightfully so as a rep. And then two is you've got to win through other people. And that's different. But if the expectations are set, like I'm sure they were in your example, they definitely were originally in my example, in the same company, same location. And I like to think I excelled, and I know for a fact you did. So it can happen.
Yeah. And I think also, like, I think something that helped me in that trajectory was like, you spend a lot of time educating us as reps about the business, right? It wasn't just about process. Like, we obviously spent a lot of time on that. But, you also let us know what the business's goals were and why margins are important and selling clean jobs and how does that impact other teams, right? Like, there was way more than just like the pressure of our close rate or the average ticket or hitting, whatever our target was or making circle of excellence, right? It was like, I understood why Thompson Creek was asking us to do the things that you were asking us to do and how it tied into the greater goals of Thompson Creek, right? And I was interested in that. And I think, sometimes you have a rep who doesn't really care about that stuff. And I think, just even those types of nuggets were really valuable to me in growing up, and climbing that ladder. There's like, okay, am I interested in what the greater businesses is trying to achieve, or am I just here to make a bunch of money, right? And there's nothing wrong with either one of those things. But I think, having a coach that kind of give you a peek under the sheet, if you will, about why those things are important and how they tie into company goals and what our team's number means versus the other three teams' numbers, and how does that get us where we need to go. And, I think all that was really helpful to kind of better understand why you were asking us to do those things too, Yeah,
those were some good times. I can tell you that, just thinking about it. Some crazy stories that, again, we probably shouldn't cover here. So I know you're passionate on both sides of the coin, like in terms of from a leadership perspective and from a, I say salesperson, but just general. I'm really latching onto this word now because I think that's where the shift needs to happen. But, the buying experience, right? What does the customer experience in that appointment? Which one you want to talk about? You want to talk more about some leadership? Do you want to talk more about sales itself?
I think we probably have a lot of reps in here. It might be more
Good.
valuable for them if we kind of talk through sales. And I think, I think leadership ties into that too, right? Like what you ask your team to do and how you ask them to do it is really key as well. But it seems like the hot topic in the chat, I'm sorry, in the group recently has been like hard closing and dropping prices and things of that sort. And we can definitely cover a lot of ground in that regard. So happy
Yeah,
to chat through that.
you and I have always kind of aligned, and I mean, I shouldn't say that. I think we've aligned around, hey, I can do what needs to get done over here the way the industry taught me. But for me, it was always like it wasn't congruent with how I am. Like I didn't like it. Like it. I mean, I did it because you can do it, right? Like, but it wasn't. It just wasn't how like. And that's where I guess the real big topic that just lit up last night. The poor guy that posted it. Good grief, man, he got lit up. And I don't. That's why I think I put a comment in there. It's not an either or. It's an as well type thing. It's just it's rounding some of the edges. You can still one call close, and you don't have to play the bullshit games.
Yes.
Right. And I think this is becoming more prevalent than ever before. I remember, and I want to turn it over to you, but one of the things that I've seen that's really different as a salesperson in our space, when I started 07, you were literally the bridge of information.
Yes.
The web page back then was maybe one page, and it was all call to action. There was no information. Everybody was so freaked out about giving up, even though we all said the same crap. No one, like, it was like blog. We don't have a blog. Like, you know what I mean? No, we'll send a rep out, right? That's the whole point was. And so when you got out there, you were the presentation, and the information within the presentation was critical, if you will. Now, in some cases, I think salespeople know, or our customer knows more than the salesperson does, or could. And so it's a little bit of a transition, and that's where I think in general it's changed. And then again in the close, I just don't think it has to be so much of it. Like,
no,
you know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. I think it's funny that, a lot of people that work for 2-sit closers or multi-sit visit, companies think that a 1-sit close is what makes them a hard sell. That's not the case. Like a bad sales rep who doesn't ask the right questions, who's dropping price, regardless of how many times you're going out there, like that's what makes it a hard sell. You can be a 1-sit close and not have to hard sell, and you can be a 2-sit close and be a hard sell, right? So to me, it's not about 1-sit or 2-sit or 25 visits. Obviously, that's a dangerous game to play, but like it's about the conversation and the information and how well you're listening to solve the problem, right? Like I think that there's, to your point, like when I started in 2013, the customers were definitely a little bit more educated, but not the way they are today, right? And you could get away with fudging something that might not have been true, or, talking about your competition in a way that maybe they couldn't really validate, or they didn't have the time to go shop other people, right? Like you could sort of tell the homeowner these things and they would have to believe you, right? To your point, like you were the source of information, but that's not the case anymore. And if you're a rep going out there thinking that they haven't done their research, you're going to get burned, like the reason you're there is most likely because they already did some research, right? Like you probably definitely passed the Google sniff test of reviews. I'm sure they read them. I'm sure they've maybe even tipped into Angie's List, right? Like you already passed some test. That's why they said yes to have you out, right? And then it's about, and I see you talk about this a lot, is like, dude, your appointment is made or broken in the needs analysis. There is no doubt about it. No doubt.
That's ultimately where I see is outside of not being the bridge of information as much as it's discovery.
Yes.
It's seeking to truly understand, and there's, gosh, man, we could go on for hours about it, but I think you just hit a great point that gets overlooked. Two things. One is you can still be a hard closer, quote unquote, on a second sit.
Totally.
And I remember years ago, someone I'm just going to say it was probably a yo-ho type thing. Like you whenever price hits the table, that's when the close happens, like no matter what, right? So whether it's 1-sit, 2-sit, doesn't make a difference. That's when we'll say the close, however you want. I always tell people, if you 2-call close and that's how your business is structured, find out what would have to happen to have gotten it done on one.
Yes.
Right? Ask us. And then the other side of it is customer didn't buy from you your one call close. They buy from your inside sales partner, or maybe your company allows the follow up. Cool. Yep. Don't go just write that deal. Find out what happened or what was different. What didn't we address? What was still basically uncertain that's changed between that. And then address it, or, or make those adjustments for the future. And again, second call, it's the easiest way to take a 2-call closed business and move it to one.
Move it to one. Yeah. Yeah. No, I've been working with some contractors that are 2-sit closes. And, when I watch the first visit, it's like, well, we didn't really provide a ton of value here, right? It's like, that's why it becomes 2 visits, because they're actually just taking measurements and then going back and bringing all the value in the second visit. But like, it's also contradictory because a lot of times marketing's telling them, hey, you're going to get a price, then the rep breaks it into 2. So you already have a broken promise, right? And to me, what's high pressure is not providing the right amount of information to satisfy the questions and concerns that the homeowner has to be able to say yes to making that purchase, right? And whether you do that in 90 minutes or 3 hours or 2 visits doesn't really matter. But if you don't do that, to your point, when the price comes out, then it's all about price and you're trying to jam it or you're trying to discount it or whatever you're doing. And like that pressure becomes anxiety in the homeowner because they still have all these questions that you didn't answer and you just want to close them, but you didn't earn the business because you didn't do your job, right? Yeah. And I think something that you used to say to me that really stuck, and I even parrot this still today, is like, your job as a sales rep is to do a world-class demonstration. And if you do that really well, you're probably going to close, right? But if you're focused on selling, you're not going to sell anything. And that's where the pressure comes in, And I think because the homeowner is so educated now, they probably already researched the roof and the specs and all that crap, right? What they want to know is like, who are you? Can I trust you? And is your company actually going to deliver what you say? Because I can go buy GAF from anybody. And that's true, right? Yeah. And if you sell OC, it's pretty similar,
Yeah.
So it's, you're just splitting hairs at that point on the product, right? It's about everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I see discovery. I see general, what would probably be considered the soft skills, engaging. How do you engage a customer? How do you engage a stranger, right? If you're an awkward, me back in the day, I used to equate a lot of things before HR departments were as big as our sales teams. I used to equate a lot of things to dating.
Yeah.
Right. But like, if you're that awkward guy creeping out the chick at the bar, or vice versa, could happen, but it's usually the guy, right? Like, we got to work on that. And you can work on that. I mean, there is things, but like a lot of people overlook that whole initial, I call it engage. Like, how am I going to begin to build a personal and then professional connection and trust? And if you're awkward, or one I see that's often is they don't know how to kind of roll with resistance. I love it when a customer's like, I don't want to go to the table. Well, we got to go to the table. And I'm just like, golly dang. But, again, and then that brings up another topic. And I'll ask you this straight up. Do you think the process has to be as rigid as how you and I were brought into it? I mean, you couldn't run a lead unless you rattled off that one page. Remember the 1-page pre-close?
Yeah.
4 paragraphs. You got guys today. They can't even ask a simple closing question. And I'm like, dude, we had to memorize a 4-page pre-close. I think that was the longest script in the book we had out of everything we had. And one of the things I will credit to you, which was awesome because I saw it years later, is you were smart and said, right, 4 paragraphs can be 4 sentences.
Yeah. Dude, it's too many words. I think it's also like, I think that the best application of a sales process is understanding why you're saying what you're saying and what information you're gathering at each step, and then knowing how to apply it, right? So like the best sales reps, that I've coached is like, all right, they could read this script, look at it and be like, all right, well, that doesn't sound like me. It sure doesn't feel like me. And it's not going to suit my personality. But if I say this and I achieve the same thing, like, is that cool? The answer is absolutely yes, right? When they're modifying like the psychology or the influences where I think comes into play, especially a new rep, I would probably kick them back over to process and be a little bit stricter there. But like once they build the confidence and they understand why they're doing the things they're doing, then no, because I think that every appointment is so dynamic, right? You have customers that are just going to bulldoze you. You're going to knock on the door. They're going to drag you to the window, right? You're never going to have a shot. Remember my first window appointment? I got shredded and kicked out in about 15 minutes. She looks at me. She's like, this isn't going to be a fucking $1,000 window. And I was like, yeah, it is. All right. But like you never know what you're walking into, right? And maybe they're having a bad day, or maybe the kids are going crazy. Like who knows? They were fighting before you got there. Like you just have no idea. And so you have to be dynamic, right? But you also have to know that there is a certain amount of required information that has to be delivered, right? And how can you ebb and flow and make it make sense? You know, and now I do think things build on each other, right? Like if you're out of order, you're probably going to get more resistance in certain places. But I think the best reps can flow through it, sort of like maybe miss things, come back, insert them. But I think it's all about like, do you understand the psychology and influence you're imparting on the customer? And if you do, I think you can kind of navigate it in a way and morph it to like your personality, because we hire salespeople typically for their personality and their ability to be bold and talk to anybody, right? That's why hospitality folks are really talented in this industry, right? They just can talk to everybody and carry conversations about everything, you know? And I think that like when you push someone so far into like process and script, a lot of them lose that personality and they just try to become this thing that they thought that you wanted them to be, right? But then they lose themselves and it's not organic, right? It's like, how can you pair process and personality? And that's the best sales rep. And so that was long-winded, but I think there's a lot of ways to deploy the psychology of the sale. And I think that's more important than doing it in this perfect exact order, you know, because customers are going to do what they're going to do. You're in their house, you know?
Yeah. When you brought it up at the beginning, it made me laugh. Like, it made me think like, I don't think I ever said the word exploratory in my life until I started my career in in-home sales.
No, I don't know if I've ever seen it written.
Yeah, right. You were like, oh, today's this is gonna be somewhat exploratory. Right?
Yeah, let me get my magnifying glass out. Yeah,
you know, and then it made me. It was a sad experience. But obviously we lost a good friend of ours about maybe a year ago. I don't know, but my point and why I bring that up is, I actually started in the industry with him, and but at the viewing. We ran into a lot of longtime friends, and you realize how ingrained some of those things were in, because like the first thing, you know, jokingly would be like, you know, did the office explain to you what you're going to do here today? Like we said, that was how we, instead of saying hello, we're sitting there going, you know, my job's a little unique because and I'm like, oh my God, that's been a long time ago.
Yeah, you can tell how traumatized we all were because we still remember those exact words.
You had to. And I always tell the story, and it sounds like it's like concerning. I went 0 for 10 out of the gate, and I was like, because I thought I was better than the model. I was like, I came from the financial services, mortgage side. I was selling $1 million loans to people. And I just remember coming back in, and our boss at the time was like, Joey, which drove me nuts that he called me that, and he knows that. I hope he hears that on this call. But he said, I'm sitting there going, man, I don't think I made the right move. Why the hell did I listen to you to get in this damn business? And he's like, I can tell you. And then, of course, somebody just said Big Papi forever. True. Big Papi was in my class. Big Papi was not the sharpest tool in the shed. At least that's how he perceived himself. I think he was a lot brighter than people give him to. But I remember him and others in that class, Steve Wheeler, all these guys. And I'm like, and this is bad. It's my ego, right? I'm like, I'm more educated than these guys. You know, I'm looking at and it was right. I wasn't on model. Yeah. And the first time I started to do that model, I mean, just the switch came off. And then once I had that fundamentally down and I understood, like you're saying, the why behind these steps and the psychology of it, yeah, I started to make some tweaks. But in the beginning phases, I think it's at least fundamentally has to get, you know, taught the same way. And you brought up a great trainer through your time at TC. He's a stud, right, with it. And I know I've talked with him about it in the past, Tim. And so I just like to take, because I know that's it's a common thing that pops up, right? And you talked about behavior. And if you look at what we ideally like, it doesn't make any sense that you can expect them to want to follow a script. I mean, one of the things in that behavior trait is that they want autonomy. They're rebels. They want to be, out on their own. And you're saying, got to do this, got to do this. So, that's some interesting stuff. So let's talk about the close, because it comes up so often. And I think you already kind of talked about it. And I think it's a good point. Like when the customer's not clear on or doesn't have the information, you brought up a great point. Something we always used to say is like, customer just wants a price, but they need the information if you ever expect them to make a decision.
Yeah.
And so I can definitely see the pressure there designed. Do you think, trying to kind of position this, like where else do you see pressure arising actually in the close? If we did actually give them all the information, but do we trigger it sometimes in the close with the way we do things or say things?
I think what comes to mind when you ask that, and like right off the top, is I think the thing that I'm just going to use this word, irks me the most about a sales rep is when they make assumptions, right? And I watch it happen all the time. I listen to hundreds of Real Voices now, recordings. I've been on ride-alongs with the teams that I consult for. I've been training and certifying sales teams now. And it's like, because they don't ask enough questions in the needs, they assume that this customer situation is similar to, Mary Jane down the road that they worked with yesterday or whoever, or, I've ran 2,000 leads in my life. I know exactly what this is, right? But like every customer is unique and what they care about is different, right? And it could be some stupid little tree in the front yard that's planted and it means something to them because it represents, a past loved one or something like that, right? And you don't know if you don't ask these questions. And I think that where the pressure comes in is that you made an assumption, you were operating off that assumption and pitched that, right? And now you're in the close and you're catching resistance and you're frustrated because you think you did a good job, right? But you typically made an assumption and now it's rearing its head instead of asking the questions to understand, even if they're the questions you ask every day, right? It's still a new customer. You got to ask them. This is their first time, right? And I think that the assumption sales reps operate off of based on past experiences produce more objections than anything else, And I think that resistance is just the customer saying like, you haven't satisfied my concerns, right? And it presents itself in stalls, objections, whatever it is, right? But like all an objection is them telling you they don't have enough information to say yes yet, right?
Yeah.
And it could be a bullshit lie of like, oh, I got to get back to work. It could be I got to talk to my partner. It could be we shop and we always get 3 quotes. No one's doing that anymore. I think it's all of those things. And it's just the fact is that when you hear those things, you need to look at yourself and not like attack the customer or put more pressure on them or immediately divert the price because that's not what they're saying, right? And I would say if you've done your job well, 9 times out of 10, it's really not about the price. It's that you probably missed. I mean, well, if you did it well, it probably maybe is about the price, right? But if you didn't, and you really got to be able to like kind of self-reflect and like similar to what you experienced, I remember I went 0 for 13. I called you and I was like, same exact conversation. I was like, Joe, I don't think I should do this anymore. I think I'm gonna turn my bags in. You're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, come into the office, maybe keep your bags in the car, but like, let's talk about this, And I remember we went to Vin's office and he just set me straight and we went back on process. You rode with me and you're like, Jack's like, you're doing the right things. Like, don't change it. Right. And then it came right around and I sold $2 million that year, And so it's just like, I think you have to also be able to self-assess without the ego, And I think that sometimes that's hard to do when we're salespeople, Some of us have big egos. I can admit that too. But I think like the assumptions are some of the most dangerous missteps in that rear in the close.
Big time. And I don't even think and that's why ride-alongs I think are so critical, is I don't even think a rep realizes when they do it. This business can become very monotonous as a rep, 3 a day, right? Like that's it's and it becomes patterns. And next thing you know, you're on, I'm pitching, you're doing a ride-along. You're like, do you realize that you cut her off every time? Like, and I secret shop because I love it. And I make my wife, gotta have both present. Hey, She's like, gosh, come on. But now she's like, it's funny because she's like, you know what? Yeah, that guy's garbage. Well, the most recent one, it was funny. We're in the guy got like basically defensive in the close. And my wife said, you didn't listen to me during, in the beginning. Why do I need to listen to you now?
Oh my God, I love it.
I'm like, honey. I mean, because she was like, look, I'm going to spend my time here with it. Like, she's starting to know a little bit about it. But the other reason why I really like her in there is because she's a consumer. Mm-hmm. And I can see this business through my eyes, right? I try to be, objective when I do them, but I always look to her and I go, how do you feel? How did you, whatever, after the fact, obviously. And I think it's a big one. And I think again, if anybody has any amount of leads, appointments run under their belt, it's vital to ride, because they don't catch it. And even if they did notice it, like you said, ego kicks in. I've never taken I can't say that, taken a debrief call where they're like, yeah, I fucked it up. Like, I didn't do that. Like, rep's going to always position it, in a way that it wasn't necessarily quote unquote their fault.
Kind of making it about the homeowner sometimes, or like justifies why they missed this or that. It's like, at the end of the day, that doesn't matter, right? Yeah. You always have to go back to basics. And I think that was one of the things I learned from you was like, I'd overcomplicated certain steps, or I had added things or changed it. And to your point is like, okay, I was making one tweak in one appointment. Then I made another tweak in another appointment. 10 appointments later, I'm completely off process. Don't even know it, because I made these small tweaks and I'm thinking it's all good. But like, the reality of it is anytime a rep has been struggling, and it didn't matter how good they were or if they were new or not, all we did was just a full reset. It's like, hey, like, let's not overcomplicate it. Let's just get back to the basics, push them back through the process one more time. And every single time, it didn't matter who it was, just right back up, And it's like, I think we overcomplicate things. Sometimes reps just overtalk with filler because they feel like they need to say something. It's like, no, just say what you need to say and watch the body language, listen to the responses. If there's two people in front of you, look at the way they're interacting, right? Like, that says more than anything you could be saying to them at that time.
Spot on. I freaking love it.
Yeah, like this one in the chat, marketing did it.
Oh, you can see exactly. Good. Yeah, exactly. Right. No, it's not me. It's the lead. And again, and I love those debriefs where you're like, well, especially back in the day, the way I used, naturally you're just like, oh, did you do this? Did you do this? And they're like, yeah, I did that. And I'm like, well, I guess they just don't like you, because if you did everything, I mean, like, but
yeah, if that was true, you would have sold, right?
Yeah. No one wins in those, meaning the sales manager doesn't win in a coaching environment because the rep didn't get anything out of it. And again, and self-awareness is huge, but yet hard when you typically have the personalities that we all have. And there's unicorns out there though that are like, nope, I totally dropped the ball here, right? And they're always constantly improving and looking to improve. But it really does take that second set of eyes because of the body language. And I'm not crapping on all the tech that's out there. And everybody I talk to always says, oh, what do you think of this? And I go, hey man, if this is true, that 55% of the transfer of communication is body language, I don't know how that is going to help in that situation.
Yeah.
I need to see when the customer rolls their eyes, or I need to see that in the close, the rep all of a sudden has a twitch like a crackhead, which is, I'm totally cool with crackheads, by the way, but like not in the selling environment. It's going to freak a customer out. Yeah. And or
even just like, there's so much slight language, right? Like we used to call it care language, and saying certain things in certain ways is like one or two words. If you just shifted, I actually think you posted something in the group yesterday about that, right?
Yeah.
It's like the type of questions you're asking and how it comes out. Like, you might just have said that or spoke that way your whole life and never recognize that it may actually present as a negative to that consumer, and somebody else looking at it. But then I think this kind of brings me in this whole other topic of, this is also about leadership, right? And having a good coach, because I mean, man, there's so many lazy sales managers who don't leave the office. And if you're a sales manager in this industry, you should be in your damn car. And I can't stress that enough. If you're not on 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 ride-alongs a week, your team probably isn't hitting goal. And I wouldn't be surprised, And I think like that was something I really respected in you, is like, you got in the car, man,
Yeah.
and you didn't want to be in the office. I mean, we used to have to rotate manager on duty, which is painful, but it's
Yeah.
necessary for what we were doing at the time. But like, man, that was my MO. Once I ran the sales team, I was like, everybody get out, get in the office. I'll pick the leads, like go be with your team, because that's the only way you can see them before they fall off and keep them going. And some guys just need some motivation, like they just want to know that you're not asking them to do anything different than what you would be willing to do too, right? And I think, you know, when you see your team struggling like that, like you got to wonder, like, all right, how much time have I spent teaching them these skills and practicing and showing them the thing, because that's just as important, I'd say, than the rep, working on it themselves. Like, yes, they should be doing that, but how do you model that as a company? And I think this ties back into the whole pressure thing too, is like, if your sales managers are just calling you and hammering you about your close rate and getting bigger deals, but like they're not investing in you, like go work somewhere else, because the consumer is only getting smarter. And if
Yeah.
you're not getting groomed and coached for that type of, consumer or whatever situations you're being put in, like you're being failed by your company,
Yeah.
There's plenty of great organizations in this industry, and, big ones, small ones, like just make sure they're investing in that, because I will tell you, that training organization at Thompson Creek is what created that machine. And then the managers know how to run the teams, right? But there's an expectation when they come out of training of what they should know. And then it's on the sales managers to make sure that that continues to build. And, but that foundation in 90 days is unbelievably solid. And getting 40% closers in 90 days is hard to do. But the amount of time and investment, both monetarily and time wise, is what makes that a machine to be able to plug anybody into and make them successful, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, that cannot be missed, because you
Yeah.
can't expect your team to have steady conversions, growing close rates, if you're not giving them those skills on a consistent basis and you're not out there checking it yourself,
Yeah.
And I agree. I don't think anything can ever replicate watching that experience happen in the home. I mean, like, I listen to Rillas, and there's something to be said about the AI trackers and looking at trends, right? And I think, like, more from a macro standpoint, there's good information there.
Yep.
But I think on an individual coaching lesson, you got to see them do the thing and
Yeah.
watch the customer, because you can't replicate that.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's, and I did it probably indirectly, because I do openly admit I wasn't fond of them for a long time, because a lot of times you're riding with a rep that's struggling, and it's hard to watch. Because I'm also believe that's a whole nother topic, but like ride-alongs, you got to determine before you go in the home, like, I need to see this person through and through regardless, and not jump in to save it, because then, you're not, so you have to address that. That's a whole nother topic. But I tell this story because it's true, and to me it's funny, because sometimes when sales managers, when ride-alongs got better for me was when we had iPads, because at least if it was miserable, I could surf the web. And I know that sounds bad. Everybody's like, oh my God, whatever. So I met my wife now of 8 years. I met her. Shoemaker knows this story. I met her in a ride-along online, swiping right.
Yeah.
Actually, it wasn't a swipe one. That sounds a little like whatever. I think I actually did maybe pay $1 a month to be a part of this one, but I was that miserable.
Worth every penny
in the ride. But here's what the other reason why I tell sales managers now, it's like, don't worry if you don't have the answer. Like, it's, first off, you hit I love what you said earlier. It's like, guys, you're just going to get them back you're going to identify one, maybe two little things, and you're going to get them right back to the basics. You don't have to come up with this next, whatever, like great guru thought process. But I think just the example of being there, and that's why I say, because I was online dating during that. And again, I don't take pride in that now, but I am married to my wife now and still married. But it was
worked out in some regard.
Yeah, it worked out right. Yeah. No. Actually, it was. I still remember the appointment, so kind of weird. But anyway, it's being present. It's being shoulder to shoulder. It's building a trust relationship. You don't have to be, again, the the grandfather or grandmother of closing, like it's support, it's encouragement, but it's in the trenches. And if you ever read, like, since my father's passed, I've really dove into his military background with the Marine Corps, and it's those generals that literally in Vietnam were shoulder to shoulder in the trenches, willing to, like, that is what motivated those dudes to really fight a war that, if you study it, we shouldn't have been there. But that's a whole nother, you know what I mean? Like, how did those guys, whatever. And that's because those dudes were in the trenches with them. And
Yeah. I mean, even if they're not struggling too bad, it's like, also go ride with them, see what their day's like, take them to freaking lunch, like, appreciate them, because I know other people in other roles in home improvement think they have a hard job, but I really feel that the sales rep role, being a road dog, you're on the road, you might be in a company that's driving you 200, 300 miles a day. Yeah, that was me, like,
Yeah.
I mean, when you're putting 40, 50,000 miles on your car in a year, you're away from your family for long days. You're getting home late. Maybe you didn't sell. You got beat up all day. I mean, that is a fucking hard job. And there's not many jobs out there that are that hard. And it's like, when you have a good performer, they should also know they're appreciated. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that that's just important as, getting somebody back on track too. But, like, it's like spending time with your team. Like, should be, I don't know. Again, I was pretty strict about how the sales managers spent their time. And if it wasn't, 70% with their team, something was wrong, right? If they were getting bogged down with contracts, customer issues, all this stuff, like, there's something else broken in the system that we need to take a look at that's taking you away from your team so much, because they need you, like they need you. And if you don't want to coach your team, like, probably shouldn't be a sales manager,
Yeah. And we identified that something was wrong in that process. And thank God, Andy Hall became one of the world's greatest
exactly
admins initially, but and because, again, it's like, hey, that's not what you're here to do.
Yeah.
We can get support and get help in that environment. And
totally.
Yeah,
Paperwork's already written. We'll have somebody else look at it. It's not more revenue at that point,
Yeah. It's I work with a guy now who jokes about, like, uses the analogies, like, the Colts didn't hire Peyton Manning to catch footballs. They hired him to throw them.
Right.
Like, he can do it, but that's not why we pay that guy millions of dollars a year. It's to do the role in the position and do it well, and have others for other roles. But yeah, that's a big push. I think this is going to be a disaster the way it comes out. I heard a joke one time, and it just stuck in my head, and it was like, hey, if you hire a sales manager, day 1, measure their ass. And then day 365, take another measurement of their ass. If their ass grew, it's because they didn't leave the office, and they need to be put on a performance improvement plan, because their team's probably in shambles. And now, for all my HR friends that are on this call, I didn't say that.
You just get like 3 violations.
Yeah, totally. But that wasn't me. I just heard it, and I thought it was, but it's a valid point. Like, and then here's the other thing that you brought up that I think is true. Obviously, one, it can very well be true, meaning the sales manager is playing CRM desk jockey.
Yeah.
But 2, even you have to understand, sometimes when it's not true, it can be that perception of your team. That you guys just go out to lunches together, and you just, which we did. But like, that's all, like, because there were 4 of us, it was a rowdy group. But
that round table in our pit was fun. I'm not gonna, that was a good time.
Right. But it's even when you are out there working, actually, I really depending on what, like, a lot of companies now use Teams for their chats, right? And all those things. And I always recommend sales managers for 2 reasons. One's a valid reason, the other one's kind of underlined. But when you go on to a ride along, that you notify the team, hey, 2 p.m. I'll be unavailable. 1, so you don't waste time calling me.
Yes.
But 2, it lets them know, damn, Joe or Jax is in the trenches, especially if it's a Saturday.
Yeah.
That's the best.
Oh, yeah.
You know what? I'm gonna go bang out at 10 a.m., but I'm putting it in the chat, because, again, don't call me if you need help. But 2, it's like, shit.
Yeah.
This guy's getting after it with us on a Saturday.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember, like, the comparison, right? I mean, we saw tons of managers come through Thompson Creek, right? And it's just, when they saw something different, I think they were like, and it was something, sometimes I'd be like, really, like that impressed you? And it'd be so small, right? But it's like they're watching, whether you think they are or not. They're paying attention to that, probably more so than they need to be. But
Yeah.
I don't blame them, right? Like if you're gonna follow someone and they're your leader, watching those characteristics and those behaviors is important, especially when you have a good rep, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think that it culturally too, right? Like you're going to have a more engaged, loyal, harder working team when they see those types of things, right? Versus just getting the whip from the ivory tower, saying, get your
Yeah.
close rates up, or why didn't we hit our number, or
Fix it.
whatever,
I
right?
would if I could. I love that. Try harder. Okay, Yoda. I would
Yeah.
if I could. Like
Yeah.
everybody, winners and losers start the day with the same goal.
Totally.
It's something's broken. And it's funny you bring it up. I'm not going to pat myself on the back, but one of the things I've always said about you and I did ultimately interview you and bring you on board, but like you were a referral from Katie, right? Like, so I didn't know you, but one of the things that I think you and I had a different relationship other than just business.
Yeah.
Like I always post CMH because it's something you and I used to joke about back in the day. It's something, whatever, right? But like when you would come into the office and we'd have, an impromptu one-on-one, it was probably related to music.
Yeah.
And other extracurricular, activities, let's just say extracurriculars. But like it wasn't always, but then there was a time where you're like, yeah, because we were passionate for what we were doing, that we would talk, but it wasn't always, and I don't know. I just thought we had a different relationship because again, just looking at somebody and saying, fix it or whatever.
Yeah. It's not even work. I mean, that's the other thing I appreciated about you. And I've been really lucky to have some good bosses in my life. And I remember when I was young, my mom said something to me. She's like, if you get one great boss in your career, like that's probably normal, and even one great one is lucky. And like, I've had a lot, I had you, and I think you were what I would call more of like a holistic coach, right? Like, yes, we had a friendship, and it gave you insight into what was really going on in my life, right? Whether it was good, bad, or ugly. And in those couple years, in my first few years at Thompson Creek, like my outer life was kind of ugly, there was a lot of stuff going on. And, whether I was on process or not, doesn't really matter when your head's not in the right place. Right. And I think that the mentality and the motivation, I was always fired up by like the memes you would send, or you would send a quote in our team update, and you always sent the numbers out, which like you got to send the numbers out. I don't care if you think your team doesn't want to see them, whether they're good or bad, you got to put them in front of them. Right. And it's like, I think that I've been lucky enough to have some great bosses that really cared about me as a person. And I've been able to be open and honest with them about my life. And we were always able to talk about how was that impacting my performance, right? Whether I was an IC or a leader, because those things impact you, and if your manager can't, or you don't feel safe, sharing those things, you're gonna bottle them up, or you're not gonna be honest about it. And I mean, sometimes maybe you just need a day off, like I remember there were days I called you and I'm like, Joe, like I just can't do this today.
Yeah.
And you're like, I got it. I'm gonna put somebody else on it. And there was even times where, the situation wasn't safe. And I remember I called Andy Hall, and you guys were in a meeting, and he's like, what's up? And I was like, dude, like, I know you want me to run this lead, but like, I just don't feel safe. And like, if we're going to go here, you need to send Poppy and maybe another guy with him. It just didn't feel like psychologically. I was like, I was going to be fucked up if I went in that lead and tried to run it, because I was going to be worried if I was going to get out of here or get attacked, Yeah. And we'll never forget. Andy was like, don't even say another word. You're good. We'll have the call center call the customer, reset it for, whatever. And that was it. And I wasn't penalized. I wasn't pointed at, and that was just, and so I think it's like, being able to be honest about that stuff is like, it gives you insight as a coach as to like, where's this person at? Because if it's just a head case situation, pounding process on them isn't going to do anything for anybody, So yeah, I think that was really key. I'm a
mindset, just diehard. I had an amazing opportunity in a baseball career, and that was where I had the natural talent, but the mental faculties didn't align at that time in my life. And it opened my eyes to like how powerful it is. 'Cause I literally couldn't control some of the actions of the, the mechanics of playing the game. And I'm like, the hell's going on? I've been doing this since I was 2. What happened to muscle memory? And you're like, oh, damn, that's really happens there.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier, and that's why I kind of jokingly, call this windshield time. That's a lonely ass place out on the road, right? And you're driving home at 10 o'clock at night, and the only thing on is some sad ass country song that makes you want to, kill the dog, divorce
Drive up the road a little bit.
Yeah, right. You're like, geez, oh, flip. And I've always been amazed. I was taught, and it's, if the rep's in the home, I'm picking up my phone.
Yeah.
Come heck or high water, like it just is what my wife knows. She's like, oh, luckily I don't do that day to day anymore. But like,
yeah.
And then back in the original days, it was the Nextel, so you couldn't even like cover you couldn't hear. You had to walk out, But it's, if they're in the home, I'm answering, and then obviously making sure they're home safe. But it's I think, and I think back to kind of tie it back to what we talked about in the beginning. It's whoever's hiring for that role needs to set those expectations. It's a very rewarding career if that's what you want.
Yes.
But if you just want to stack them deep, sell them cheap, like go grind and make a ton of money, like then go be a top rep. Trying to kind of persuade them into the BS not reality of sales management. I get a lot of pushback, because I'll open up meetings sometimes going, sales management sucks. This is the armpit position of this industry, because you're the firefighter. Everybody's going to call you. They want you planning out the Christmas party. They want you involved in this. Oh, by the way, this job's canceling at install. Like and you're like, what the F? And then you got 15 adult daycare.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I always try to inform people. The same personalities that we want to make a great performer sales-wise, understand that this is what you're going to deal with them outside of the work. This is the ego. Oh, yeah. This is this. And those expectations are critical. And then it's very simple that you like, does that kind of jive with where you are, or it doesn't? It always was in my mind what I wanted to do because of where I wanted to go, but trying to put that person in that position that, values don't line up, winning through others, not really their cup of tea. But I don't think it's impossible for somebody to do. And then something I saw you post before, I think in the group, it's been said a ton, but frontline sales managers, they get in the chair and they get zero training in most orgs. It's the biggest need in the world.
Yes.
It's the biggest need in the world.
Yes.
And I do a little, have done and do a little bit of consulting, and it's like, hey, cool, sales reps, I don't care. Here's your model. Are they on it? Good. All right. Let's talk to you.
Yes.
What's your activities day in and day out? Because that's how it drives the results. You can stare at that CRM all day. That closing rate ain't going to change sitting here. What activities can you take? But most of them are like, I don't know. What the hell do I do now? And sorry, I'm going long here on this, but I'm all about leadership. I think it's obviously, I wish I was John Maxwell. But in the beginning of a sales manager's career, frontline sales manager, they need to know the fundamentals of, it's okay to be a manager. And what I'm getting at is a lot of people go leader versus manager. And I'm like, you can develop into a leader, and that should be your goal. And you're going to learn that with experience. But like day one, who can train me how to actually it's okay. Be a manager.
Yeah.
Manage the process, basically rule number 1, make sure my reps do their job. Rule number 2, make sure you maximize them doing their job. Like at a fundamental level, what the hell do I do once I sit in this chair?
Yeah.
And
I remember we just kind of figured it out. I mean, I just sat with you and Shoemaker, and I was like, what do you guys do every day? Right? Like there was no training program for us at the time, and you did a great job of like helping me transition in while you transitioned out, which is hard to do. And then I just attached myself at the hip to Shu, and I just watched, that guy is a mastermind and a beautiful brain. And just watching him crunch numbers and how he would assess that and where that analysis took him into like the next step of coaching, right? Is like, I'm so grateful that I spent that time with him because, he, I'm gonna beat you up, Shu. You didn't always answer your phone, and that's okay. But but when you did, it was fucking gold,
Yeah.
And I think that like he had to know that was coming, I assume,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah, 100%. Southern California. What do you expect?
We couldn't get off windshield time without mentioning that once.
Yeah.
But no, I think like that is what has made some of the most successful sales managers that I've brought through the industry is like giving them a formula of success. I call it like a navigation to excellence is like, hey, your week has 5 days in it, and in sales it's pretty much 7, but like technically I'm only allowed to say it's 5, right?
Yeah.
And on Mondays these are the meetings you're going to be in, and here's how much time you should spend preparing for them, and here's a template, right? And how you should look at your numbers, right? On Tuesdays, great day for you to ride. We have training classes Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. If you go on a ride along, great. You do the ride. If you have other people struggling and they really shouldn't be practicing on our customers, put them in training with this guy, right? And then we kind of just divided and conquered. And it's like, if you don't have anybody help set that up, that takes a long time to learn all of those things. It's like, can you get off the ground running by just having structure in your week? Because dude, this industry is noisy. To your point, customers are canceling. You got finance declines coming through. You got a project manager pissed off at your sales rep because he missed one thing on the contract, right? And it's like everything's the biggest fire that's ever been seen, And it's like, okay, let me just, shut a lot of this out. And I mean, time boxing, okay, from 8 to 9, I'll deal with customer issues. From 9 to 9:30, I'm motivating my team every day. Nobody talked to me, And guess what? The fire either disintegrates because somebody else put it out for you, or you can deal with it an hour later. Like it's okay. And I think, even for a sales rep too, like some of that stuff, especially if you're in a 2-sit where you got to do your follow-ups and you got to get pricing back to them and you got to schedule another appointment, right? Is like, how can you put yourself into a structure that allows you to maximize the time when you're with your customers and then decrease as much of your, time you spend doing those things in your personal time because you need a break, right? And I just think there's definitely not enough focus on sales manager training for sure. And a lot of them I feel really bad for, especially in the smaller companies, because they typically were really solid reps that became the manager, right?
Yeah.
And they're expected to grow these teams and hit these crazy quotas and, manage 20 people. It's like, dude, like, what is this person getting to be able to do that, right? You're going to ask me for these things. Well, what am I getting from you, right?
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's a hard job. I remember Poppy said to me, he said, I said to him one time, I was like, man, you guys I was generalizing reps, and obviously, I'm a rep at heart. So I was like, man, you guys are crazy. He's like, no, Jax. He's like, I actually think you're the craziest one. I was like, oh yeah, why is that? He's like, because you chose to manage all of us. I was like, sometimes I definitely think you're right.
Yeah, because it's more to even take it to that point. You're picking up the phone at 1 a.m. when somebody gets in a fight with their wife, and okay, I get it. You're not going to cover the lead in the morning, but are you okay? Where are you? Like, and my phone never turns off to this day for my own personal reasons around that. But we've taken those phone calls. Again, back to understanding who you're dealing with. These are a lot of that's calmed down. I've seen over the years. Like when we first started, man, none of us were married. Obviously, it was a lot younger. It was definitely a fraternity in the beginning. I mean, HR was 2 people, maybe 1 really. Yeah. And we were meeting every night we kept whatchamacallit Annapolis afloat, paying their, our bar tabs every night after the 7 p.m. lead. Yeah. And then do it all over again. That somewhat has changed, but that, I guess, what kind of was ingrained in me that, hey man, when if shit ever hits the fan with you and you got to figure out who to call me. Totally. And that goes a long way. It also is a short leash. Like, don't be calling me, you got to fix your life. And that's another point I think gets overlooked is I brought this up before, and it stems from my father. My father apparently enlisted in the Marine Corps. He wasn't drafted for Vietnam. And towards the end of his life, he never talked about it. But I asked him and I said, hey, why the hell you had an opportunity to go to college? Like, he came from a good upbringing. Like, it wasn't, he said, man, I didn't have like any purpose at 17 and a half years old, I was kind of a little bit of a wild child, which was hard for me to understand because he was such a disciplined person, what I knew. And he's like, dude, I was going nowhere fast in the right direction. And in having those conversations, he passed away. I think companies that, and what he ended up telling me, because the Marine Corps was known for that. Like everybody said, oh, join the Marine Corps, join the military. But really the Marine Corps was like, we'll help you find that purpose, whether it's a career or it's just to fight this war. Like, we're going to not only teach you how to stay alive, but then we're going to teach you a lot of awesome principles and values. And that you then, my father was a prime example of it. That dude never talked about it, but he lived. Now that I study it, I'm like, oh my God, now I know exactly why he woke up at 4 a.m. without an alarm clock. And he had this discipline that was unheard of. And I think there's an opportunity, if a company's smart, that you can recruit just like the military did. Because here's the other thing we all know, don't want to get into politics, but that option isn't on the table anymore. Because of all the politics involved in military. Like, I wouldn't want my daughter to be into it, right? That's gone. Now it's like, okay, well, we can be that, right? They may not spend 10 years selling with us, but if we have them for 4 and we help develop them, hell, we're going to show them how to make $200,000-$300,000, and we're not going to then maybe help them understand, hey, you're going to want to save this, or you're going to want to start investing. I wish I did. I look back and go, damn, right? That doesn't have to fall on it, but that's the opportunity. And I always equate it to same way customers will always defer to price when value isn't present. Your reps are always going to defer to their income when there's no other value present by being on the team or being in the team.
Sure.
And I'm the worst at sometimes overlooking that. But that's like a huge opportunity where there's people at TC that could go make maybe double. Let's just be honest, right? Like their skill level, or potentially or have, but there is that side of it that keeps them. I know that loyalty is there because of the equation is bigger than the W-2.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think, like, for some of these people, they come into this industry and they might have been lucky to make, 30, 40 grand the year before. All of a sudden they're making 150 and they're gambling and they're spending it, and they didn't, and I've just seen people make a ton of money and then ask me for a draw, or ask me for a front on commissions. And I'm like, where did 200 grand go, buddy? Like, we need to have, I know this isn't necessarily my business, but like, let's talk through this, and can I help you? And I think that's just like my financial advisor roots coming out too, but I totally agree. I think, there's so much more to it. And I think this goes back to just like that holistic conversation of people is like, if you understand where they're at and you understand their habits, and I also think you really need to understand their goals, right? Like, everybody gets in sales for the money. That's true. But there's typically something intrinsic that's driving that, right? Does the money mean that you'll have a better life than your parents did? And that's why you need that financial security, and you just drive to make all this money because you don't want to be, poor, or whatever your life experience is. But I think like best coaches can, understand who you are, where you are today, where you want to go, and try to give you or make introductions to people who can help you achieve those things, because it's not always about making the most money. It's like, how can you have a good life? And, I agree. It's like, when things aren't going well, it's very easy to just point to the paycheck or the leads or whatever went down, this year versus last year. But there's so much more to it. And I think, working for a company that cares about you, especially when there's just a lot of places that burn insurance sales reps, is so important.
And it's the only way that you're ever going to make the position a truly professional position, in my opinion, versus just a hustle, right? Or this my side, no. You can have a professional career in selling. It's a noble one.
Yeah.
And like back in the day when we used to get all the free tickets to, all the professional sports games, and these hoity-toity doctors would be in the same suite, and we were making double what they did. You're like, we sling vinyl.
Yeah.
Yep. It's crazy. I know we went over here. I want to ask you one question. So the COVID bubbles popped. because, and the reason why I say this is like a lot of, in case anybody's listening, whoever does listen, Jax is talking about numbers like her doing 2 million. These are all pre-COVID numbers. Like this is 100 million before COVID. This is going from 60 to 100 million in I think you said 3 years time before COVID, without tax credits, without like, so do you think I mean, are you seeing or hearing, like, is the skill level hurting right now on a sales standpoint? Because it has been, I don't never say easy, but a little easier than we've, if you just got into this industry in the past 3 years and now you're like, it's the leads. Like, well, no, you really weren't that good. You never, or like, it keeps me up at night.
I think this is a great topic. So I think it's two pieces, right? I think fish were jumping in the boat and you didn't have to be as creative from a marketing standpoint, right? Like there was so many leads that they couldn't even, consume them all. They started hiring a ton of sales reps just to cover leads, right? So I think that's a key piece of it. The marketing machine got lazy. A lot of people got rid of canvassing teams, right? They just had people calling. And so marketing has to get creative again, right?
Yeah.
And I know I would say probably 80% of the companies that I talked to in the last year in 2023, were saying my leads are down, right? Some of them 5%, some of them 20, 30%, right?
Yeah.
That could be $20 million, So lots of variation there, but also the people who've always been good at marketing didn't have that problem, right? Because they were just like, oh, well, we'll just flip this back on. They remembered those roots that got them what they needed before. And then I think on the sales side, yeah, I think that when you had a good brand, because a lot of people went out of business too, right? Because there was a lot of people who just got wiped out and didn't make it through that too. I think that those people, the leads were just flowing. They had a good brand and they were selling on reputation, I think also people who pivoted and started doing things virtually to meet the customer where the customer wanted to be, that's obviously been very successful. But yeah, I mean, I think everybody's getting back to the grind now. And I think they forgot about it because it's been 3 years now,
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's why I focus so much on the skills, and the training is like, you have to have that. It should have never gone away. If it did, it has to be there now because the customer is smarter, it's more competitive. And I think the economy's in a place where people are scared, the job market's in an interesting place. And so I think all of that compounded, right? You got a lot of fear, the wars, there's just, and all of that is noise, right? You can still sell in this environment.
Yeah.
But I think you got to be
average sales are $5,000 higher now than you're like, I think that's another conversation for some of the veterans in the space that maybe started off selling a product years ago at $1 amount, and now it's there, and they're having a hard time from a limiting belief to get over that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it's something that keeps me up at night because I went through it personally in the mortgage business. That's why I got out. I started in the boom and I didn't set my foundation and my roots, and quick dollars, man. It was like, and then 2007 started it, and and I was like, so it's I don't want to see a bunch of people exit the business, but I think we always say a lot of better people make better salespeople. So I think the people that do leave are the ones that need to go anyway. But if you're not willing to put that, because I think the opportunity, we're still what, 400 billion, like it's an abundant pie.
Yeah. And it's still been growing, right? And I think it's still expected to do so. So I think at the end of the day, this ties all back into customer experience, right? Like you can be a successful salesperson selling anything, in my opinion, whether it's in this industry or another one, if you're like fanatically obsessed about the customer. I think the minute that the company doesn't focus on the customer, I think everybody in that company is going to struggle, whether it's setting leads, selling leads, installing leads, whatever it is, right? And I think that where the sales reps should be focused now is in understanding how to align with the customer's value system. And I think that's something that I probably harp on the most when I'm coaching teams is like, it's one thing to ask a question about like, how long you've been in this house? How long has this problem been here? Whatever, right? Like, cool, you need to know that. But that's not going to sell you the job. What's going to sell you the job is asking Joe questions like, Joe, have you ever done a home improvement project before in this house? Yes. What was it? How did it go? How did you shop for that? What made you decide to buy from them, right? How was the experience? Have you ever had to have service from them? Did they follow up and, deliver on the promises they made for the warranties? Did they answer your call? How long did it take them to get back to you, right? It's like all of these things I need to understand what you care about, what applies to you, and then when I tell my company story, I better be checking every single one of those boxes, right? And it's like that's what a customer wants to hear now. And yes, they want things fast, and we live in that Amazon society, but like you're also seeing small businesses and things popping in a totally different way now than maybe even like 2 years ago. Like you're seeing people start to make their own bread again and pasta, right? It's like there's something that like this cheap, fast mentality is more so shifting into like, how can I do these things myself or do it in a way that, reduces this exposure to my family and chemical food, whatever it is, right? Like people are getting to a place now where they care more about quality and the inputs and the interactions, right? And feeling connected to like purpose than I've seen in a long time. And maybe that's like the space I operate in now because but I mean,
love it.
I think it's so key. Like I just saw Power Home Remodeling on LinkedIn this week. They did a complete rebrand of their company, and if you watch the commercial, it is like I was so wowed by it. But it just checks all these boxes about what society, like how society has shifted, and like they're $1 billion brand. They hit $1 billion last year, right?
Yeah.
Those guys, those two, the CEO, the co-CEOs have grown that business over 800% since they took the helm. There's a reason, right? They got great technology. And they're doing things that they're aligning to the customer and meeting the customer where they are and making the experience suit that, right?
Yeah.
And like, you don't become $1 billion business not doing that now,
Yeah.
And there's even a ton of small businesses on Amazon, right? Like it's actually funny because people think like, he's the whale that came and gobbled them up, but he actually gave them a platform now.
Right.
You see a ton of small businesses on Amazon. And I just think my point there is like, I think customers are shifting into a more intimate experience. And if you can create that, no matter how big your company is, because you're the one that's in the house with them, and that can be an intimate experience.
God, man, I don't want to unpack it all because you just said gem after gem after gem. The last one that you just said is the biggest one I've found, and I have experience in this, is they buy you, not your company. So if you're the small guy, and I 3 years ago quickly became the small guy when we launched a bath business, right? And we didn't really leverage the parent brand initially because we were a little worried about how this was going to go. I realized hell, they didn't even know who I was when I walked in. Like, and we had a scheduled appointment. They're like, well, "Are you with this?" And I'm like, "No," because of online and some of the aggregators we were kind of slinging. We were doing some things anyway. So I think that's critical, right? And that's the same way if you go and you read a review and it's like Apple products suck. It's one review because the guy that person had a bad experience with one employee.
Yes.
And now Apple sucks in their mind. And you're like, yeah, it probably doesn't. Yeah. Like, sorry about your luck, but that's how people react. So that can sway a person. The other thing that you brought up that I think I just want to chime in on is when you're asking all those questions, obviously you got to have that knowledge, but the thing that gets overlooked or not discussed often is the customer then is hearing themselves say it.
Yes.
And they're like, crap. Like that's the biggest thing. When we talk about discovery or needs analysis, man, the one of the big shifts that's easy, get away from asking leading questions. It's the most glaring thing in the world.
Yes.
Right. And then the other one that I'm a big fan of, if you really want to leverage it, if they're factual based questions that we have asked for years, I'm not discrediting them, like when was the home built?
Yeah.
Because that's public record, flip it, a swap, and say, hey, prior to meeting with you today, I was doing a little bit of I was looking through your file here, and I noticed that the home was built in I noticed the home was built in 1978. Does that sound about right?
Or validating versus like, yes.
Now we're going, this guy spent time before coming to see me versus just showing up 15 minutes late and not apologizing, right?
Yes.
Or, I oh my God, the Jones just down the road. I remember doing theirs and stuff. I think theirs was built in like the early 80s. Is that about right? Yeah. Oh, the Jones. Who the Jones? We should, hopefully that's a real story, but if not, it's like, but my point is, it's like, man, just some of them are so leading. And then the understanding that, there's information you do need, but it's really for them to hear themselves, especially, and I don't want to go too long, but a lot of times, one of the big eye openers for me in the past, probably 2 years, we're so used to telling people why they have their problems versus asking them what they think the reason is.
Yes.
What do you think's causing that?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, a lot of them are really informed, and I want to know what they know.
Yes.
Right. And
yeah, you can get so much information. Is like, if they spit out something really technical, maybe they had somebody come in and pitch before you, and that's a great way of getting that out versus being like, are you going to shop around? Because then you look defensive or like you're trying to do, it's like, it's just so silly and archaic. It's like, no, I totally agree.
It's I pay a lot of money for some coaching, and I always laugh because literally the sessions start with what's on your mind. And then the next hour is me filling it in and solving my own problem because I'm intrinsically motivated.
Yes.
I told a guy on the chat the other day, he's like, what do you think? I'm like, look, there's a reason that addicts, it's not that people hate change. They don't want to be changed. And it's when you study like addicts and addictions, it's like they know they probably shouldn't do crack, right? But they have to discover that themselves.
Yes.
If you want to make it a priority, that because the guy on the chat, which was great, I was glad he reached out, was asking about urgency. And I'm like, I don't think you really create it. It's either there or it's not, but you do uncover it, you do stoke it, and you do, more importantly, help them uncover it.
Yes.
But me telling you, I tell you, these windows, if you don't, and again, it could be important, but if it's not a priority, I always say people know, you know me, I chew. I know it's important not to do this, but right now it's not a priority. Unfortunately, it probably won't become one until it's too late. And that's the world we live in. But that's the difference, man. Yeah. And it's like, gosh, dude, you could really and then to make it conversational, right? Actually determine what my next question is based off the history of the answer I just got.
Yes. And not make the assumption, right? And I think also I see so many reps that just ask questions because they feel like they're supposed to ask like 15 questions. It's like, okay, you could ask 6 that are really, really great, ask layering questions and get so much information versus just asking to ask. Like the customer can see through that, right? Like they know if you're just bullshitting or wasting their time, right? And like, yes, their time is valuable. You only have a commitment for so much time, like use it wisely. And I call them values-based questions. Is like, you have to understand what triggers them to make a purchase and feel comfortable making a purchase. And then you have to align your whole pitch to that. And yes, I should know when the roof was built or how old the windows are, but that should be more of like a box check. Like you said, like, hey, I have this information. I just want to make sure everything's correct. We pull this from public record or I did my research, whatever, because these are things that go in the contract, right? So like, yes, but more importantly, like what's important to you? How long has it been like that? Why did you wait? Have you tried to repair it yourself? How much time did that cost you? How much did you spend money on that? Do you want to keep doing that? Whatever. And I think, the progression of the problem is a big one. And my boy, Tim Shanty, is a killer at that. Is like, okay, they may know why they have that problem now, but do they know how that problem evolves? Right. Yeah. And how much more expensive that gets if that leak continues to go in your insulation, your roof. Now it's mold. Now we're talking a mold remediation crew coming in here, right? Yeah. On average, that costs this. Did you know that was a risk, right? It's like, those are the types of things that build urgency. And you can kind of plant some seeds and educate them, but like, you got to get them to see and agree that that's one going to happen. It's realistic. And also you're not selling on fear there, right? It's like, this needs to come from a place where I'm educating you and I'm not just trying to like scare you so you buy something from me today or tell you that it's a problem, right? It's like, I got to show you and educate you and you can make your own decision, Joe. You're a smart guy. I just want to give you the information. And also like, don't be afraid to walk away from business and also be like, we don't need your business. It's just important too. And then taking it away sometimes makes them want to jump on it too. So it's like, there's just so much there, but I think the customer is more intelligent now than they've ever been. They're only going to get more intelligent and the old shit doesn't work anymore.
Two last things. I just want to chime in on what you said, because you brought them up. The key in a good discovery, aside from any of the questions and all that, is intent. Where's your intent? Because people feel it. I'm not trying to get foo-foo with people, but there's energy, right? There's a reason why we have some of the intuitions and the faculties that we have, right? People feel it. They know. And if your intent isn't right and you're not in an unbiased or unattached situation, and then talking about what you kind of mentioned it's that back to how I always like dating. You always were most successful. Whoever was most indifferent won. Yeah. But if you're the needy, assumptive guy at the bar, let's say, right? I've never met many that were attracted to that. It's the, hey, like, I think you're great, or I'd love to have your project and your business. But at the same time, I'm not losing sleep over it. Even if I haven't closed in my past 10, I still have to have that be the perception because people feel it.
Yeah.
People feel it. And it's, God, man, this is good. We won't wait too long, Jax. You brought it, girl. I love it.
Yeah, man. I'm happy anytime. Let me know. This is good stuff. And yeah, it's fun to just rap about everything. And, you know, I think it's you know, the industry is evolving and there's just so much happening. But I think it's just still such a great opportunity. And you know, I think with private equity coming in is like there's a lot of fear behind that, but that can be so huge for these businesses. And I think the level of sophistication that some of those guys bring is just, you know, can take a lot of these companies to the next level if they find the right partner, right? That's important. And having a you know, a shared intent there as well. And you know, that can be really positive for the sales teams. I think sometimes when you're that far down from, you know, like those types of acquisitions and things, you kind of have concern about how much change the company's going to bring, but a lot of their intent is to get you better and more leads, help you with recruiting, and help bring technology that streamlines the business that should make their jobs easier. So there's just so much happening out there, and whether you work for a big company or a small company, there's so much opportunity to be successful. And I think like the one thing that I still truly believe in is like you're really competing with yourself and their customer's current situation. It's not always about like who your competition is around you, and I don't think that you should ever be afraid of that as a sales rep. Is like just focus on making their situation better than it is today and being genuine. And to your point, like you should want to help them, and it shouldn't always be about making money. And I remember Vin used to say, like, the bigger the difference you can make in someone's life, the bigger your check's going to be. And I still believe that to be true.
And for sales managers as well, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's awesome. I'm gonna hopefully get you back on because I mean, just dropping bombs. I love it. I love it.
Love you, Joe. It's so good to see you and hang out with you.
Yeah, I know. And we're not even that far from each other technically today, but we'll do that in person next time. But I'm sure you're connect with you through Facebook. Obviously, if
Facebook's cool. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. And my consulting business is called Exponential Ventures. So just actually launched my LinkedIn page yesterday. So you could follow there, chat me there. Awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Jax.
Cool. Thanks, Joe. Enjoy your vacation.
Yeah.
Bye. See you, man.